right, welcome back. I'm your host, Michael Stamatinos with the Advancing Healthcare Innovation Show. And if you're new to us, we're super excited to have you here. We also happen to be crazy passionate about healthcare innovation and adoption, as well as leadership and access. And if this is your first time tuning in, let me tell you a little bit about what we're doing here. So we're a healthcare innovation company, and we're focusing in on bringing real stories from folks that are in the trenches, showcasing their stories in healthcare to life. And our aim is highlighting real people that are really innovating. And look, we've got an incredibly action-packed year. We've had some amazing historical guests that have come onto the show, as far as new guests that are coming onto the show. So we're super excited about that. And I'm pretty pumped because this is actually the first episode where we will have three Greek leaders that are within healthcare. So we've got Niko Drakoulis, the founder and chairman and CEO, as well as Demetra Anagnostopoulos, co-CEO of SurePeople. Nico, Dem, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael.
Michael.
We're so honored and happy to be here with you.
Yeah. So guys, I'm just delighted that you have been able to kind of join. And I'm just wondering if maybe before we kind of dig in, I haven't done a ton about sharing the audience about who you guys are. I think it might be best if I pass the baton to you for you all to kind of maybe share a little bit about historically who you are, and then kind of where SurePeople is headed and how you're getting there. So take it away.
That is great. Well, thank you. Dem, go ahead.
All right. Well, it's such a pleasure to be here with you, Michael, and obviously Nico, and with the audience. So, you know, what we're really up to, we're a technology innovation company. I personally come out of over 25 years in the leadership and learning and development space. And so on the services side, which is sort of the yin and yang relationship that Nico and I have, you know, technology innovation and then services. And really what we're up to is trying, in particular within the context of healthcare, trying to really reframe the way individuals, teams, leaders in leading healthcare organizations, or all healthcare organizations, anybody providing service to human beings, can think about the human factor and being a human-centered entity in a different way than I think we've been stuck in our thinking about, which I believe has led to all kinds of unintended consequences. And, you know, the irony, right, of why people get into the profession, because they are completely human-centered, right? They want to take care of people. They want to contribute to the evolution of humanity, whether it's on the research side or the clinical side. And I think healthcare as an entity and healthcare organizations struggle with how to balance all of the transactional, process-oriented pressures, right, that they have alongside the mission and the purpose that people are really striving for, and how to stay connected to that. So that's a lot of what we're up to, is how can we bring technology that has human-centered data and information in it to help reframe people's mindsets about the value they can bring to the, you know, to just what's an incredible purpose and mission, right? Which is about healing people. Nico,
awesome. So, hi, Nico Drakulis. Pleasure to be here. Demetra, we also call her Dem. So if you hear Dem throughout this session, it's Demetra that we're referring to. So ultimately for us, it boils down to human beings. No matter what you look at in terms of business, there's always people in the center of it in one shape, way, or form. And for us, really extrapolating the understanding of human beings and bringing that front and center so that we can actually get to the root cause. Why people feel a certain way, why people behave a certain way, why teams perform or don't perform. We always boil it down to right back to the people. Who are they, and how do they connect? So for us, that's our passion. I come from the technology sector and the telecom space and the media space, always looking for ways to solve problems more effectively, more efficiently, in a measurable way as well. And I had a perplexing moment prior to starting SurePeople that I reflected on my journey and always look back to see where I could have been a better leader. And I always thought, because I'm a values-driven individual, I treat people with love and kindness and empathy. I thought that is what made me a great leader. And in some cases, when I was reflecting, I went to moments where I had a team in front of me and I was speaking with them, and I would be sharing a vision, and half the room would be looking at me and saying, "Oh my God, this is great. We're going to be successful. And I love this idea. We're revolutionizing X, Y, and Z." And I have the other half of the group looking at me, scratching their head, and I'm looking at them and they're not into the situation. They're not agreeing. They're not speaking. And I just, in my mind at that point, thought, wow, what's wrong with them? They don't see what we see. They're not at the same level that we're at. Of course, that was in the back of my mind. So fast forward through the years, I had a lot of those experiences, and I'm just wondering why that was happening until I met Prism, which it was an algorithm that was on, at that moment in time, on DOS, on a floppy drive. And I went through it, and it brought back the data and insights about myself that actually answered that question. I was talking to people as if they were me. I wasn't addressing them with how they were receiving the information. And that's when I had that aha moment where I said, wow, if we have this information and we can apply it to how people are thinking, and we can help leaders understand how to communicate better and connect their teams, we can change the world. And that's where it all started for us in the journey. And we were very fortunate. One of our first innovation customers was a healthcare system, Boston Children's Hospital, who is very near and dear to them and I. Not only did we create an amazing solution that delivered the results and beyond the results that we were all expecting, but we also created some great friends and a really valued customer out of it. So that's a little bit about me and what we're up to. And of course, Dem covered a lot of what our mission is with the healthcare industry.
So let me kind of dig into it, because the last 36 months have been really interesting from a leadership standpoint, going through times that really just haven't unprecedented naturally. I'm curious, to what degree were folks prior to the pandemic, I guess, where would this rank on their scale from wanting to be better communicators, having more highly collaborative, highly productive teams versus now? Do you think that the pandemic amplified that? Because there's been a lot of strains within the workforce, and I'm just kind of curious to get your feel, your perspective from conversations that you're having day in and day out, where people land on that.
I can go and Nico chime in. 1000%. I think for those folks who are organizational development students, the work of Lewin, he talks about freeze, unfreeze, refreeze. And in every change effort goes through those 3 stages, right? You've got a frozen state pre-pandemic. You've got an unfreezing, some huge event happens and everything gets thrown up in the air and people are like, what? And they spend the first, 6 months to a year just confused about what to do and where is everything going to land. And then there's a refreezing that happens, right? Where people start to get used to certain routines and a new way of being. And we're seeing a lot of that happening with the return to work, the hybrid. I mean, there are healthcare organizations and so many healthcare leaders would never in a million years have thought that they would have hybrid organizations or clinical staff working half week from home and half of the week, in a hospital setting. And it really threw a whole bunch of things up in the air. And I think, again, it goes back to this idea of the leadership side and then the process side, right? Where there are a lot of rigid processes and structures in place that were also legacy systems. And then it had to do with, okay, so who are the leadership teams and the human resources leaders in major healthcare organizations who actually saw the unfreezing as an opportunity and not a trauma, an additional trauma? And those are the people, I think, who really took a step back, at least in our observation, and said, we got to reframe the way we think about the people, our leadership culture, what's unique about our leadership culture, how do we find hidden talent up and down the organization, How do we understand what people need in a whole different way? Paying attention to issues like well-being. I mean, the huge surge and focus on well-being, right, of hospital employees and staff. And I think the ones who are going to win the day are the ones who are trying to architect the refreezing, because it'll happen just like when you throw the puzzle pieces in the air and they all land, right? You either put them back together consciously or you just leave them scattered on the ground. So the folks who are really, they're trying to, and we see it with our partnerships, the National Center for Healthcare Leadership, the American Hospital Association, they're getting in the game to help leaders start to say, how are you going to architect this new reality? What does it really look like? And what does it mean to you? So Nico, pick it up from there. That would be my take.
Well, Dem, I think you covered it pretty well. I mean, certainly leaders need to be empowered and they need the tools in order to unfreeze and refreeze. And we've seen the challenges that they have, especially where you mentioned, what happened with the pandemic. I think the pandemic in healthcare just pulled the covers up, right? I mean, there was challenges long before that with burnout, and there was trouble finding new talent to come into the field. People weren't really going into the field. So I think there was a lot of challenges. And then came, the pandemic, and the burnout got higher. The health force, that's one of the reasons why we actually came up with the name health force instead of just workforce, because we feel that it's just a critical area we have to focus on. And it's going to take multiple partners, consultants, the health systems to come together to work together to solve this challenge. Because this is not just about business, and it's beyond business. This is about the future of this world, for that matter, and society. So I think, we're really working closely to help the refreeze so it happens the right way, and people have the tools to refreeze, and then they have to be flexible in the refreeze too, right? Because they can't just say, hey, this is the way it's going to be, because there's too many moving parts right now. We see what's happening in healthcare with contracted nursing staff coming in, right? And so you have people coming into a culture that they're not aligned to the values and the principles of that organization, so now you got a mixed organization there. So there's a lot to do, but certainly I think Dem covered the most critical part about, people coming back now to a new way, and we have to not only adapt to it, we have to figure out how to adapt to it.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because you mentioned workforce, and there's been a lot of talks around workforce shortage, and I'm going to throw something out there. I'd love to have you kind of react to it, but and I kind of ascribe to this thinking is that there's really not a workforce shortage issue. There's more of a workforce alignment issue. There's plenty of talent that's out there. Maybe they don't want to work in a place that has a poor culture, organizations that are notorious for having poor cultures. How do you react to that? And then how do you mentioned, Nico, about measuring. I think there's one thing that I've noticed is that when you walk into an organization that has the it factor, it's more or less it has a really solid culture. And on the flip side of that, when it's off. How I want you to react to about the talent alignment problem that we're seeing, and then also talk about maybe some of the things that stand out amongst organizations that have great cultures. If you can both kind of comment around that, I think it'd be helpful.
Yeah, I'll start, Dem, because I think you have a really great example that you can share to carry it on. Certainly I think it starts at the top, right? You have to have the leadership that actually cares, that truly cares, that it's not just lip service or, mission statements that you share in an email or on a wall. It's really your behavior, and people see that from the leadership. Then it goes down to the management, and then it goes down to the frontline people. So I think first and foremost, it has to be genuine from the top of the organization, and you have to have a leader that truly cares, and all the leaders have to be aligned with that. It can't just be one leader and then trying to get the others. It's not going to work. It's like having a team. You can have one, we're living that with the Chicago Bears right now, right? We have a great quarterback, but the rest of the team, we have some issues with it, right? So you're not going to win at the end of the day. You may have a standout and saying, wow, he's amazing and talented, but not the organization. So to me, I think we have to have leadership aligned and connected. Then you have to have it now down to the next level of leaders. So eventually everybody can really be empowered and aligned to what they're trying to accomplish. I think that's the first thing. Then you have to have the tools in the organization to allow people to share the way they feel, to communicate the way they should, to really make sure people are in the right seat, right? Because ultimately, if you have somebody who can be very talented, but you have them in the wrong role, and the reason I mentioned to have Dem talk about this is we have plenty of examples of how we've uncovered that challenge with data. You may have somebody who is going to leave because they may be a great nurse, but they're in the wrong department. So I think it's really empowering leadership. I think it's really aligning with leadership and bringing that down to the front lines. And Dem, I think you should share that story about the one nurse. And there's a lot of stories, but I think you know which one I'm talking about, because that just shows why people will leave an organization or not be 100% committed and be more burned out.
Totally. So the example that Nico was referring to is, it really influenced our thinking actually when it came to kind of what can we bring to the table within healthcare. And he mentioned the PRISM algorithm earlier, which is a psychometric algorithm, right? So it measures 54 traits and attributes of human beings. It's not an evaluation of good or bad. It's just a mirror image of who you are, right? And and so we were on a call with a chief nursing officer who had previously been a nurse, right? And had been promoted up through the ranks. And her psychometric portrait was characterized by things that you would never expect in your sort of generic or your, stereotypical thinking of what a nurse should be like, right? She was very high power, high precision, concrete, orderly, logical, mixed, internal, external, very goal oriented, very motivated by freedom, very motivated, core fundamental need of control, right? Those traits and attributes are not soft and fluffy, right? This is somebody who really thrives in a high-powered, fast-paced, and she was also spontaneous, orderly and had spontaneity, right? 50-50. It was 50-50 orderly, spontaneous, because we had this discussion. And she said, the big mistake people make is they look at a function like nursing and they see it as a monolithic thing, because we know that nurses have a certain baseline of training across all of them, and there are certain criteria that they've met, and there are certain processes that they've all gone through to get to where they are, right? And she said, it's not like that. So she said, when I was a nurse, my jam was the emergency room. So I loved the emergency room. It was fast-paced. It was moving. I could leverage my spontaneity. I would move a patient through. I would hook them up with the doctor. We'd get the result. We'd move to the next person. I didn't have to sit for 5 hours and hold someone's hand, right? And what she said, and so, yeah, I was tired at the end of a shift, but I felt productive and aligned, and it was easy for me. I was in flow. She said, conversely, they would assign me to the maternity ward, to go pick up a shift in the maternity ward. And I'd suddenly find myself in an environment where I had to, hold the baby, hold the hand, hug grandma, be overly relational, warm, soft. And she said, and you have no idea how much energy output that required from me. She said, you would think I'd be more stressed leaving the ER shift, leaving the maternity ward shift. I was so burnt out at the end of that shift because of all the energy, because it was not really aligned with my core traits and attributes as a person. I was literally, she said, crawling out of there on all fours. And then people still called me mean. And I had put in all that effort. So think about it, right? So what we're saying is, how can we bring technology in and think of this as a data set, aggregate this type of information, so that what if you had 1,000 nurses on a system and you could actually select for traits and attributes that would align most with the open assignments that are available, and deploy your workforce in a way that aligned most with who they are as people, so that they can be in flow, and you can increase resilience, reduce burnout, increase engagement, have people feeling more successful. That's just like a small, minute example that could have a profound sea change impact on a hospital's ability to, retain and motivate a nursing staff. So that would be an example of
Yeah,
kind
it's
of
kind of like how do you get the right people in the right seats in the bus and do that at scale?
right. That's the crux of it, right? And then just to build a little bit on the first part of the question, I think for leaders, it's about what are the pillars of the behaviors that are the pillars of our leadership culture that we want to differentiate us. Like, for example, where we've seen it really successful is in organizations where they are continuously measuring leaders against a set of core behaviors that they're cascading all the way to down to supervisor level, right? Anybody who has people working for them have to be fluent and embodying a certain core set of behaviors, or else they're not even eligible to be promoted into those roles, and they have to demonstrate it at a certain baseline. And I think when an organization commits to that from the top down, and then they're continuously measuring and remeasuring, and it's not in the spirit of I'm going to slap you on the wrist, it's in the spirit of we're going to develop you because you actually want to embody this, and it may not come naturally to you across all of them. That's where we've seen a huge shift in their ability to really mobilize and align people.
So for a leader that has several thousand people in the organization, and they're trying to share a message about how the organization is evolving and innovating, knowing that each of those people is going to take that information in differently, how does your solution support them in that? Knowing that not everyone is going to really take that message to how it was intended to be taken, how do you guys support them with that? Or do you say, you know what, instead of broadcasting a message, maybe we'll do it in smaller groups, smaller cohorts, train the trainer kind of a thing? I'm just, my mind keeps going to how is this done? Because leadership done at scale is really difficult. Obviously, you cast a vision, you do that, and you continue to just do it and do it ad nauseum. But how do you do it really effectively? I guess what has been describe to me the ideal customer that you guys have worked with that has done this and done it really well, where you're like, wow, this is, if we could just take this in a little bottle and bottle it up and give it to everyone else, what does that magic sauce look like when it's done in real life?
Michael, I think you see both Dem and I smiling because you're asking the question. And of course, we didn't get a set of questions that you were preparing to ask us. It's just how you're connecting the dots to the world, that we're connecting the dots in as well. And we're leading ourselves to the same dots, which is great. And, we've thought long and hard about that. We built an operating system that's driven, by people science, right? So that's why we call it the people science operating system. And when we looked at how things were being done today, right, it's almost like the quote by Einstein, you can't fix the problems with the same level of thinking that created the problems. And I think you hit the bullseye that you're trying to fix the human side of the problems from a department called human resources, which is typically known for payroll, or you go there when you're about to be fired or laid off, or benefits. And then they tried adding all these different titles to different folks, chief people officer, culture officer, and, engagement experience officers. We looked at this after a lot of conversations with leaders and organizations and realized, if people are joining an organization, okay, but they're quitting their manager or their leader, where's the disconnect and where's the problem? And there's lots of data that points to that Gartner has done studies, and a lot of other organizations, Gallup has done a lot of studies like that as well. And this is why we really focus back on leadership and teams, right? How do we empower leaders to look at their microculture? Because you deal with your manager almost every day in some cases. And that's who is the person that's leading you and supposed to be coaching you to do your job better, to have a better experience with your job. So our mission and vision is tied to empowering leaders right? Enabling leaders so that they can actually connect with their team members on an individual level and on a team level, and understand how to communicate with one another, and understand what's happening at all times to support them. With the challenges that are coming today, with layoffs, with mergers, that's where I believe it's a leader now that's going to be taking that responsibility over instead of HR. Now, certainly HR is going to have access to the data and be part of the solution and support the leader. But I think empowering a leader with prescriptive data, with giving them the ability to make decisions, right, on data, on the people, I think that's what's going to change everything. And we've seen it happen time and time again with all the work that we're doing. I mean, we've got one, I'll share this story, then I'm going to hand it off to you, Dem, but we have one valued customer who came to us. She's a VP of a technology company. And actually she said this to Dem. I started this year off with 8 people. I now hired another 10. So I have a team of 18. I haven't met the 10 I hired, and I had to integrate them into an existing team that's been together for a long period of time and are connected, and they're buzzing along. And how did I integrate them? Thank God for SurePeople and Prism, because I understood how each of these individuals was wired and connected. I had an easier time communicating with them, introducing them to the team, connecting the team back with them. And that's why I feel like this really was a game changer in hiring 10 people I've never met. And Dem, you can elaborate a little bit because you're the one that had that conversation. But there's a lot of stories like that moving back to a team and empowering a team leader to really build that microculture and show that as an example to other teams. I think that's where the future is. Dem?
And yeah, well, and to just build on what Nico's saying, build the microculture, but the microculture that's aligned to the values and behaviors that the organization, that everybody's on board to support, right? And there are a couple of things I think around this, to kind of reinforce the idea. The one thing is, I think, I had a really interesting conversation once with a global head of operations for a large Fortune 50 company. And he said to me, Demetra, don't ever believe anyone who tells you a leader doesn't want to own the culture of their team. He said, we as leaders just don't have the access to the data and information we need, and also the tools that we need in order to be able to take that responsibility. And we also don't always have all the skills, right? A lot of people get promoted because of their technical expertise into roles, not because of their leadership and management capabilities. That can get acquired and built over time. And so getting back to this idea of what are the data sets that really matter, and what are the data sets that we can put in people's hands that they can use. So I'll give you a concrete example. Physician leader in a large hospital system. I got a call from a coach, an executive coach who was working with this physician leader. And he said, Dem, I just had the dream coaching session. And I said, really? Why? And he goes, because there is a problem that this guy was having with one of the members of his team. He didn't quite know what to do. He had pulled up the data on himself and was comparing himself to this team member. And he had already done the diagnosis by the time I walked in the room. Hey, people in healthcare in particular love to diagnose things, and they know how to diagnose things. And so how can we create bridges to skill sets that already exist, where you're saying, well, okay, so this is just another data set. Diagnose what's happening in this dynamic between you and this person. And the physician leader says, I just had the aha that it's our conflict management styles that are colliding, not our personalities. Not this. And he said, and coach, what I need from you is confirm my diagnosis and help me figure out a strategy to solve it. And he said, the coach said it was the most efficient, effective meeting I've ever had, with a leader. And the leader felt totally validated and empowered in his ability on his own to come up with a hypothesis about how to intervene on this situation that was troubling him. Those are the micro moments that add up over the course of someone's tenure in an organization, right? That either destroy and erode on a daily basis relationships, or build and create and strengthen relationships on a daily basis. And the data that people need to have in front of them doesn't have to be complex. It just has to be as predictive as it can be, which is actually what psychometrics give us, the ability to be more predictive than other types of data like surveys or even 360 feedback is a snapshot in time, right? Like, how are people feeling in this moment answering these questions, or how are people reacting in this particular context in a particular situation today? Psychometrics, because it's a self-assessment, reveals who someone really is at their core consistently over time. And so you can much more easily predict how they might react in a situation, or how they might react in relation to others. And that's the data set that I think, and we think, really is the secret sauce, like the magic, that if people can wrap their heads around, oh, it's not about psychoanalyzing people, it's about just getting insight into what might happen in a situation, or what might be going on in a dynamic versus in a moment in time, then I can really start to strategize about how to reframe it.
So I'm loving this conversation for a number of reasons. And it sounds like what you guys are saying is that, number one, if leadership, the competency of leadership is left to one department, i.e. HR, the end is near. And it's not one department's job. And we've said this often on the show around innovation. It's not one department, one person. It's the job of the entire organization. And then secondly, it sounds like what you really have done here is that you've equipped leaders along the way of their journey, and you give them what they need when they need it at the right moment in time. Be curious is, we've talked about kind of top down. What about from a bottom up? Someone who's sort of a frontline leader, is there a way that they can leverage this to be able to properly communicate to his or her boss, superiors? Talk about a little bit of that, or does it not really matter?
Oh, it matters.
Yeah,
it matters. Yeah, it matters. We'll tag team again, Dem, because again, you're front and center with all our valued customers and the team. But from the day we began this journey, the thought was, how can we take the same data sets and empower everybody in the organization, from front lines to management to mid-management to senior management to leadership, because it is a human-centered organization at the end of the day that we're focused on. And ultimately, the same way we provide mission control dashboard to a leader, so they're empowered to look at how the team feels. If they want to schedule a one-on-one, they could prepare for how to communicate to that individual back and forth. If they set up a team meeting, how can they understand the collective team makeup and the strengths and the challenges of the team, and how to avoid them, or how to actually fix a situation that's happening. And when it comes to the individual, it's the same thing. If I'm going to schedule a one-on-one with my superior, I should know how to communicate with them, what's important to them, how can I get my message through? Because it's important to know that, hey, if I sit down with somebody, I'm a big picture person, they may want the details. So if I want to really get them on board, let me share the details so they can understand how they can help and how they can participate. Hence, one of the challenges I had as a young leader, I thought my kindness, and it was a human-centered approach, was going to make me a great leader, and it didn't. It made me a great leader to people who were more like me and cared about the big picture, but those poor team members that I wasn't addressing their need. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, what is wrong with these people? How did I not get the right people on my team? Actually, they were the better people on my team because they could actually balance me and the others who were like me. So empowering individuals in the similar way that they have their own mission control, they have their own tools and their own development recommendations, communication recommendations. That's key. So we empower them to also improve their emotional relational team intelligence. We empower them to know how to communicate with others. We empower them to become future leaders if that's what they're looking to do and they want to prepare for something like that, because that's not an easy role. Being a leader requires a lot different skills than actually being great at what you do. And that's why sometimes you take somebody, you think, wow, they're like crushing it. They're meeting their goals, 200% of quota, or they're achieving A, B, and C. They should be a leader because they're so good. Well, if they don't have leadership skills, or they don't want to be a leader, and they don't know how to support others. Those are different, way different skills. On the other side of the pendulum, you're going to put somebody in the wrong position. It's almost like putting the nurse that Dem was talking about, back in the maternity ward instead of having her in the emergency. And all of a sudden that person's not going to be a good leader. People are going to quit that leader, and eventually that leader is going to get burned out and quit and go somewhere else. So I think that's really important. Being able to answer your question, support everybody in an organization, from the frontline employees. And by the way, shouldn't you be investing in the people who are actually touching the patient or the customer? That first conversation you have on the phone or in the emergency room where they're taking your information and asking you how you feel. Think about that moment in time. You walk in, you're in pain somewhere, right? You're in the hospital, and you have somebody on the other side of the desk who is communicating to you. They should understand themselves and understand what's happening on the other side, even if they don't know how the other person's wired, but have a little sympathy, have a little empathy, knowing that that may be difficult for you. So I think it's really important across the board. Dem, please add to that.
Yeah, I mean, Michael, I'm curious, what else can I add? Like what's the kind of hanging out there for you?
The thing that really sticks to me is, okay, you're doing some amazing stuff, and what you're up against here, the enemy that you're up against here is good enough. And what are some of the excuses that you hear that trigger the box of, well, it's good enough? And I'd love to hear that.
Wow. That's a really good question. I think where I see it the most, at least in the work that we do, is actually around how the front line is supported. So there's a whole, it's interesting. We're involved in a research project right now around patient experience representatives, right? PERs. And the from to is, well, this used to be a role that was seen as an entry point, stepping stone into healthcare, like into a career in healthcare. And now we're competing with Amazon and Whole Foods and Target for hourly employees. And we have people who field in this particular hospital over 1 million calls, a month or whatever, and some crazy number of things, right? And these people are being wooed by $5 more per hour at something like a Whole Foods, right? And at the same time, you have physicians who are saying, I want all of these PERs to be college educated with a degree. And the people who are on the front line hiring these people are saying, are you kidding me? Like, we're lucky if we can actually prevent people from going to Whole Foods and work. We're actually going to Whole Foods to pull people in and train them. And so there's a whole struggle going on right now between, I think, a really achievement-oriented clinical and professional staff that exists, in healthcare, with the front lines who are actually interfacing with patients every single day. And how can you not, because people are so exhausted with the churn and trying to solve these problems, not get into a rut that says we're going to settle for whoever we can get, which then downgrades everything, versus, again, not to harp on these data sets, but trying to understand, how are people really motivated? If somebody's really motivated because a high core fundamental need of security, that $5 more an hour might be the thing that entices them away. But if they're really motivated by significance, purpose, impact, and you say to them, this is a job to a career, and they say, I'm really making a positive contribution, and I could make the same amount of money at Target, but I wouldn't have all the benefits, and I wouldn't have all these other things, and the ability to grow. That's more important to me. How are you understanding where your hooks are to get from mediocrity to performance, right? And longevity. It's a tough question. It's a complex question, what you're asking, and it's very multifaceted. That's just one little kind of take. Maybe.
Like, I'll give you what came to mind initially.
Yeah, please.
Is the excuses that I hear is, we're too busy. Oh, we already survey our people. We already do that. We do it once a year, and data looks okay. So little excuses that prevent them from actually really looking down at the root
Mm,
cause, and that to me is good enough. And if there's anything that I've learned from this conversation today, it's that, look, this is something that has reached proportions that are really bad, and it's cool to know that you guys are doing something about it, not just giving someone a sheet of paper saying, hey, here's how you're designed, but you're actually saying, no, here's how we can actually support you on this journey as you're reaching these different milestones along the way, wherever your destination might be.
Michael, you plucked something at me, really quickly, and worth good enough's good enough, and because we've had these conversations and we've been battling out to challenge the industry, which is not an easy thing to do when you really want to provide a solution to them, but we want to make sure our solution actually delivers on the promise, right? That's really important for us to gain a new valued customer. To not deliver, it's only a matter of time before they say bye if you're not delivering on what they're expecting. So for us, one of the big things that we've seen that, it's good enough, that's the standard industry level. So benchmarking, to me, when they say it's good enough for benchmarking, and they're comparing the, hospitals compare themselves to some national average on different things. And it's almost like saying, if Michael Jordan, sports analogy again, right? We have a sports division, but Michael Jordan comparing himself to the person who was the best at that league, he would have never been Michael Jordan. You got to compare yourself to the mission and vision of your organization, and what is the level you want to come in at, right? So that you can be successful and you can deliver great patient care experience at the end of the day. So I think that there's a challenge when organizations are looking at benchmarking data, saying, "Oh yeah, everybody's having the same problem, so we're good enough." Being there, of course, we want to be better, but we're comparing ourselves to what everybody else is doing. And every market and every hospital has different challenges, And to me, that's one area that I think we're all working towards, saying, look, benchmark yourself on what you did last quarter, last year, to this quarter and this year, and see if you're improving, right? And set the bar where you want the bar to be for your organization, and focus internally on your patient care experience. And, we've been very fortunate, I'll tell you, and I could certainly say a few names, right? In our valued customers, Inez Stewart, who's the Chief Human Resource Officer at Johns Hopkins, forward-thinking, innovative leader who's moving the needle because, she's committed to the mission of the organization. She's committed to her people, right? And when we have partners like that who are sharing with us how, their vision of what they want to accomplish and how they're using our system, we're actually learning from our own customers about how we can continue to improve. Or Chris Newell, Dick Argus at Boston Children's Hospital, and the CEO as well, just great leadership who cares. And when you have people who care, they are going to test things out, and they're going to take the chance and the risk that others won't, and focus on the right things that they need to improve the patient care experience. So I'm very passionate about that, as you could tell, Dem is as well, because for us, it's about how do we really bring impact and results, and make it easier for people to participate and collaborate.
So we're coming kind of close to the end of our time here, but maybe we can give you guys a little shout out. What is the best way for people to follow your work, to hear about some of the awesome things that you guys are doing? How do they follow you? And then the caveat to that question is what is one thing that you would want a leader to take away from this discussion and implement?
Wow. Well, I guess I'll start, because Dem can answer that question a little better than I can on the front lines side. I think to find us, certainly we're available via the web, so you can reach us at www.healthforcex.com or surepeople.com. Certainly for us, I think from a leader perspective is accountability. You're a leader, identify what that means to you and what you want to accomplish with your team, because it's going to start with the me before the we, right? So I think leaders have to become more self-aware of themselves. And they have to really set their purpose up to be a true leader and support their team. So I would say leaders need to really take that accountability on themselves. It's a very important role to be a leader. It's not just a title. It's a responsibility and an accountability. And good leadership starts with leading yourself first, knowing yourself first, and then truly knowing your team and understanding them to support them. A leader is not there to dictate the things somebody should do. A leader is there to coach somebody and support them and create other leaders, right? My goal is, how do I create other leaders? I mean, from the day I met Dem and our team, we do that with everybody, trying to raise everybody up. The more leaders you have, the better you've been successful as a leader. So to me, that's important.
I mean, I couldn't have said it better. The only thing I would add is just to really take to heart that people are wired differently, and that the way you experience people and the way you are experienced has to do with the sender and the receiver, and a piece of feedback you might get from person A is maybe completely opposite the feedback you get from person B. And it's probably because it's a collision of traits and attributes, or a synergy of traits and attributes happening, not because there's a personal issue. And I think our ability to, as leaders, start to think of this information that we have available to us and accessible to us as a strategic way for us to align ourselves to others and understand others better, assume the best, and also that it's not personal, is really so important. And it's something that's so easy once you start to wrap your arms around it. It's so easy to start to help others also operate in that way, which then creates, I think, a much healthier dynamic. It's the role of the leader to create health in their environment, right? And
That's right.
Safety, which we know from the Aristotle project that Google did. It's the number one factor for high performing teams. So you've got to really try to realize that it's not about, oh, that's just Michael and Michael always acts that way. No, Michael has certain needs. I have certain needs. What am I not understanding about that? And kind of become curious, I think, would be the big takeaway I'd want leaders to have. Engage your curious mind again.
Wonderful. Dem, Nico, this has been a really productive conversation. I've certainly yielded a lot. If there's anything that I took away from this, it's the fact that don't let good enough be good enough. And for those leaders that are listening to this, I think it's a challenge. Don't let good enough be good enough. Are you doing enough? Are you better off doing what you're doing today? Will that get you farther ahead? And if the answer is no, then I do think that you have to take some form of action. So for those that have joined us, if you found the content helpful for you, number one, would you mind sharing it on social media? Would you mind commenting maybe some of the things that struck you that you're going to take and incorporate? And at the end of the day, it's about taking action. Ideas make you feel great. Actions really get things done. And I'm grateful when we can bring in more innovators and doers into the community. So Nico, Dem, I'm looking forward to having you guys come back on, sharing some more fun stories, and catch up with you guys soon.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael. This was great.
Awesome.